on this computer. So it's on Excel, and I've conditioned it to look more like a Nigerian music industry and some information around them. This is not really the actual data. It's just something that I adapted. So it doesn't give us the true, the true nature of things with these musicians. This is just data for use for the purpose of learning. So this is what we are going to be using. It's always good to know your data before bringing it in. It just gives you a good idea of what you are working with. So I can see already that it's about Nigerian music industry, some musicians and their albums. And I can see there, I've got file name, I've got number, I've got that which says open, file extension there, some attributes, their folder paths I've got, and I've got names, what looks like name, but it's labeled as path, and I've got size there. So we are just going to look at or see how we can bring this into Power BI and conform this to what we really desire it for it to look like according to the requirement that we have been given. So I did open Power BI earlier. So I'm going to close this because before we can bring it in, it needs to be closed. That's how it gets to work. So I'm closing that and I opened Power BI Desktop. When we open that Power BI Desktop, this is what we get. And on this yellow leaflets it looks like a leaflet. We've got Power BI introducing also the fact that this is the desktop. We can get data from here. From recent sources, we can see that I've opened these ones recently, and they are Power BI files. Or if I want to open other reports, and a whole lot of other functions here that we can look at, more like short videos that Microsoft has done to walk people through. There is a lot there, how to get data, building reports, and a few things there that we can have a look and learn a few things from. Power BI is always updating. So what's new? If we want to join their forum, and a whole lot of things we can see on here. Normally I just come here when this opens, I close it because I don't use it. I close it and I come to, we've got our Power BI interface. And the first thing we want to do is we want to get our data in and start work. We already learned about what this file is about and a few other things there. So I won't go back to that. I'll go straight to the home menu where we are at the moment. And I want to get data. Because I know it's Excel, I can use that, but I'll rather use the get data, go on to Excel workbook, and my work is what I would need, my file rather, is on desktop. And I've labeled it as SuftNet. So there it is. So I want SuftNet CD data source. So I'm clicking on that and I'm opening. So this brings us to the navigator. So on the navigator, we see all the tables that are on that file. In this case, we've got just CDs, just one table. So I'll click on that. Let's have a preview of what it looks like. And what it looks like is exactly what we have seen when I opened it for us to check. If you have any question, and if it's very urgent, like very cogent to the step where we are in, you can actually let me know, so that we don't forget about it by the end. That's what I'm thinking for going forward. So I want this. I've clicked on it. I've checked the preview of it. I'm just going to click it because I want to bring it in now. Now, if you notice, when it was not clicked, this load and transform data down here were grayed out because I haven't, chosen any file to work with, and all I've got is cancel. So if I wanted to cancel this step, I don't want this anymore, I'll just cancel. But we don't want to cancel, we want to bring this in and work with it. Now I've got the option to load it. Loading it just bring it straight into Power BI itself. So if my data, if I'm happy with what I see here when I look to check the preview of it, it looks clean enough, it's in the format I want, no further work to do on it, I'll just load it straight away and come and work with it in Power BI Desktop. But right now we can see that the first two rows there are all nulls. So this is not looking like what it should look like. I need to transform it first. There is a lot I'm not happy with. The top bit is just saying columns 2, columns 3, catalog of V, something Nigeria. That's not really making sense to me. So I would rather than load it straight away, I'm going to transform this data first. And because I clicked on transform data, it's brought me into the Power Query editor. Now, this Power Query editor is a separate page from the actual Power BI itself. If I put my cursor down here, we can see that here we got the Power BI that we opened earlier, and now second page, we've got the Power Query editor. So it's like working outside the Power BI, but it's actually within the Power BI, because it's like it's taking this outside to clean it first, and then it will bring it in by the time we command it to bring it in. Okay, now we've got file, which is the first button there. And there's a few functions there that we might want to talk about. The first one, close and apply. Close and apply means whatever I've done here, we are going to close this page, and I want you to apply all the changes that I've made. That is the one that we would normally always use any time that we are finished working Power BI. Then we've got apply. Apply means I don't want you to close this Power Query editor. Just apply all the changes, but don't apply the changes. And close means I just want you to close this, don't apply it. Then we've got save as, options for setting if you need to set any reset anything in your options, and data setting. Not very different from the file that we had seen before. And if you need help, these two are really new to me, to be honest. I've not seen them before, but we only need this part when we are done with the work we need to do here. So we go back to our home file. Under home, down there again, if you don't want to do your close and apply under file, it is right there. If I want to bring in more data from a new source, that's my go-to. If I want to use the recent source, it's got it. This is where we just used right now. It's got it right there. If I wanted to enter data manually, this is enter data. So if I click on here, it brings this create table. So let's say I've got, I just double click this to make it editable. I've got maybe a file that I've been told that we don't have anywhere to bring it in, and I have to enter it myself. So it will take time. It depends on how big your file is, but you can actually come here and, enter your own manual data. So that's my first column, King saw me, if there is anything like that in my data. And then I click on this to add what my column 2 is, whatever it is I put, column 3, if there is anything like that. Then I come down to keep, just keep adding data, so that is doable. It is not every time that we bring data from outside of Power BI. So I'm going to cancel that. Okay, let's say this is what I want. I click on OK. And we see it there, right there. It's created as a table. So I don't want this. I want to delete it. So what I'm going to do is right click on it and delete, because that was just for the sake of us practicing. So I've got my CDs. Let's talk about, apart from the buttons on top, on my left-hand side, it's given me the queries. That's the queries that were brought in, the table that was brought in. As many as whatever you bring in, you have it on the left-hand side here. in this case, CDs. If I want to change the name of this, I don't want it to be CDs anymore, I can just double click and change that and press enter. Or I can come to the right side here and change the name of it. In this case, I'll leave it. I don't want to change it. Also on my right-hand side, we've got this the properties, which is the name. That's the query setting, under the query setting. And we've got applied steps. This is where whatever step you have done on your data gets recorded. And we can see that it's not like we have done anything yet. We just brought CDs in, and it's showing us that about 4 steps have been done. So what the computer or Power BI does is it tries to interpret your data and quickly put in some steps for you that it believes or it thinks that's the way it should be. In our own case, it hasn't really gotten it right, because look at that. I've still got column 2, column 3. I've still got those 2 top rows being all null. I don't want that. So is it possible that I change it? Before I change it, I want to look at the steps actually. What has it done? So I can click on each step. So this is the source here. And I can see that it's just telling me that I brought the data. If I click on just around here, it brings me this sort of table. But if I really want to see exactly what is done, I'll click on this wheel here. And it tells me, okay, Excel workbook, and this was the file part of it, and this was opened as Excel workbook. If my source changes, or if I don't want this data anymore, I don't want SuftNet see this data source anymore, I can easily come here. If there was any other table on that file, I'll just change it to that. Let's say we had album owner as one of the tables that was in this Excel file. I'll just click that, remove SuftNet see this data source, and put whatever name of data or file or table rather that I want. If my source changes, let's say this file is no longer on my desktop, it is now in documents. All I just need to do is make sure I come and change that source here, because if I don't, all of the work that I've done will just not be right anymore. It won't be fed the data anymore, because it is recognizing desktop as its source data, as the source of the data. So if that changes, we must come here and change it as well. So I'll okay that. Then it brought us to navigation. So navigation, if we click on the wheel there, it's just that navigation page when we chose it. So, and that's all that the table that was there anyway. And then it went straight on to promote the header. Okay, so what has it done? It promoted all scalar types. Let's look at what that promoted header is. If we come back this way, okay, this was the table that was brought in. Then, okay, let's okay that first. Then the header catalog v Nigeria music was row 1. Column 2 was here in row 1. Column 3 was also here in row 1. So that top bit, that header bit was empty, and it's decided to promote them to the header position, because it assumed that was what it should be. And then it changed something, it changed some data type around here, which I don't know which of the data types it was. All of the data, these are what we call data types. These ABC123, ABC123. So ABC123s they all mean these are general data, but it's gone on to change one of them from, okay, it changed this one. It changed it from ABC123 to just ABC, telling us it's text, because it can see text. So it is no longer general, like this. There's quite a lot under data type. So, and it's always advisable that we use the right data type. if your column is a decimal number and it's not the query editor or Power BI is not seeing it as that, calculations may go wrong. If it's a date, it must communicate it as date as well. I think we've got something similar in Excel as well. So data type is a huge thing. It wants to see numbers as numbers, so that when for example, this column here, we can see mostly is numbers. If I'm trying to aggregate, maybe add or find average, I'm going to find it difficult later on, because here is showing as a general data when it should be showing as whole number. And that is understandable because it's not just numbers we have here. That's why it's showing it as general. We see null here and we see size here, which are all text. So this is why it is interpreting these, as that. And then it went on to promote a header here again. I think I clicked something that changed stuff there. So, but we can, we can remove all these steps. We don't, if it hasn't helped you, what it's done has not been helpful, they can all be removed. But before we go on to remove any further step, let's leave this data as it is at the moment and look through a few functions here. Okay, still under home, we've got data source setting, manage parameters, which we'll learn when we have had a good grounding with Power BI. It's a little bit advanced for us at the moment. Refresh. So if your data source is constantly getting new data and you want those new data to be fed into Power BI, we just need to come here and refresh, either refresh your preview or refresh all. So each time you refresh, Power BI just applies everything you have done. You don't have to sit down every time with the same data, except there is a new requirement. Every work you have done the first time all gets fed with the new data, and then within seconds, your report is updated with the new ones. So that's the beauty of Power BI, is the automation, that it does. And then we've got all these new query. Under new query, we've got new source, recent data, enter data. Then we've got data sources, how to manage them. We've got parameters, which we will see later on. We've got query. See this here, or any other queries you have here. Those are your queries, and this is where you get to manage them. For example, I've chosen CDs here. I want to manage it. What do I want to do with it? Do I want to delete it? I can do it from here. Before, I right-clicked and I deleted the table we created, but it can also be done from here. So one thing can be done using many methods. Either you right-click and delete or do whatever you want to do, or you can come under query, manage, and choose whichever function you want to choose. I don't want to delete. Let's say I want to duplicate. Let's look at the difference between duplicate and reference. So this CD, are we okay? Should I carry on? Can we still see this? Hello?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, we can. Okay, thank you. So let's say I want to duplicate this. So I'm duplicating now. It's gone on to copy this for us. And it's because one query or two queries cannot have the same name. It's made a copy and it's called the CDs2. If I wanted to change that, I can, double click and change that to something else if I want to, or I can come here and change that. Okay, but let's look at what is. It's gone on to duplicate it such that every step we have here is what we also have here. So they are not dependent on each other because I duplicated. So if I go on to add an extra step, let's say I decide to remove this column 3 here. I decide to remove it from here. If I come onto my duplicate, it doesn't carry forward. My column 3 is still on here. So these two are independent, they become independent of each other. So when you duplicate your data, they become two separate data, and you can, whatever you do to one does not affect, does not affect the other. I'll remove that step because that was just for showing us. So, but what if I want to reference? So I want to delete this duplicate now because I don't want it. And I just want to reference this data. Let's look at the difference. Now my original query has got all these steps, while my copy or my reference just has source. So it's treating this new query, it's treating the old one as its source, meaning that whatever happens with the first query, the original copy, it will get carried forward onto the next one. So because it's treating it as the source. Let's delete what we did before, remove this column from here, and let's see what happens here. That column has been removed from here as well. So whatever we do here, it gets carried forward here. So whatever you now want to use your new query for is what determines what you choose. Okay, let's look at if I try to delete my first column, my first query rather. So see this, I want to delete you. What happens? Delete. It's not letting me delete straight away. It's giving me a warning. The query CDs cannot be deleted because it's being referenced by another query. So because there's a query dependency happening there now, it won't let me delete it, But if it was the fact that I duplicated, it would, I could have deleted very easily because they were not depending on each other. So that is how those two work. But I believe I can delete the second one, you see, because it's not the, it's the dependent. So I can delete it, but I can't delete the original where it was being fed from. So I'm taking that out. That was just for the purpose of illustration. And then we move on to manage columns. Manage your columns is where you can either choose your columns or remove your columns. Okay, so if we click down there, choose column, say I don't want to click on each column to remove them. I just need whichever ones I need here. I click on them, I choose them, and it's choosing them for me. I've not spoken about this formula bar. This formula bar uses what we call the M language or the mashup language. And this is just a translation of all the steps that we have been applying here. So it just translates all the steps here into formula. For example, source is telling us equals Excel workbook. That is, we got this from an Excel workbook. It's a file content, and this was the location of it. That's what that is telling us. We don't have to know how to write this, but it's good to know how to manipulate it to what you want, and we'll see that as we go. So navigation, let's see what it said, equals source item, CDs. That's the table we brought in, and the kind of it is a worksheet, and it's got data in it. It's my interpretation of that. And then promoted header, it used the function equals table.promote headers. Okay, table.promote headers, and it's told us what headers is gone on to promote. Change type, table.transform data type. And one thing common about M languages is that you look at, okay, we are working on a table, we transform the column there, the columns there, and the next thing you see after the kind of formula or function is using is your previous step. So the previous step is promoted header. So the results that we got from promoting header, this is what I've done with it. I'm using this function. I will use it on promoted headers, which is the previous step, and I'm doing this function, and it's just given us a list of all the columns that has been changed, the types that have been changed. And then when we go to removed columns, it's using the M language table.remove columns. Again, the previous step, which was change type 2, it removed column 3 was what was removed from there, and then remove other columns when we, chose from here table.select column, because we used the choose columns function there, and it's given us the columns that it has chosen, it has decided to keep, If we are done, go to column. This go to just, it just highlights, if I say go to this column here, okay, it just highlights that column, which we can easily do by clicking ourselves anyway, but it's good to know that that is there. Then we've got remove columns, So I'm going to remove a few steps here. I don't necessarily want them. Okay. And I don't want this either. So I'll leave it at this. Now we need to work on this data by removing a few columns. I've seen that file name, open file extension, attributes, all of those, I can still manage them for now as my headers, folder path. Those are what I want in the header column. Then what am I going to do about that? I need to remove the first, let's say 1, 2, 3, the first 3 rows. I need them out. And this is where these 2 functions come in. Do I want to keep rows or do I want to remove rows? If I want to keep rows, I'll say keep top rows, keep top 10 rows for me. And I okay that. And we see it's keeping all the top 10 rows and removing the others, I don't want that, so I'm removing that step. And you keep bottom rows. So if that's what you want, or you've got a range of rows that you want to keep, let's say, I want the first row you are keeping to be the 5th row, and the number of rows maybe 16, from 5 to 16. It will do that, for us. Or keep errors. If there are errors there and you still want to keep them, keep duplicates if that's what you want. But in our case, we need to remove rows and we need to remove the top rows. But it's good to know that we can remove bottom rows if that's applicable. We can remove alternate rows. We can remove duplicates. We can remove blanks, and we can remove errors. So I'm going to remove top rows, and we need to take off those first three rows. So it's 3 I need to take out. And here we go. So I've got this up to this level now. And now I can promote the first row as header. I can either do that here under this corner here, this table looking like thing here, and say use first row, add custom. So most of the functions you have on top here are also hidden here and there. Some are right here. The keep top rows, keep bottom rows are all here. Remove top rows are all here. So whichever one or method you are used to, that is what you use. So I've got that here. I'll do that. Use first row as header is also here. If for some reason, if we look at that, use first row as header, use header as first row. Why would I want to use header as first row? Maybe I want to demote my headers. That is what I would do, So, and it's demoted those headers, but I don't want that to happen. So I will leave my first row as header there. I believe it's also somewhere else. There's about 3 places that you can use first row as headers, but those 2 readily come to my mind, So I've got these. This is it's seen that it's changed the type itself. It's seen that as number. It's seen that as file name. I'm just checking through to see that my data types are fine. The way it has changed them. Sometimes it doesn't get them right. Sometimes it does. And, so far it's been right. I'm happy with what I see. 1, 2, 3 for numbers here. Indent, all twos. Okay. Dates created, I've got my date table, different dates here, date created, date modified, date accessed folder, you know. So before I bring this in at all, I just need to make sure anything I'm not using, they need to come off, because the fewer things you bring in, the more effective your Power BI would work. So there's no point bringing in what I'll call load that's we don't have to use. So just limit your data to exactly what you need. And when I say exactly what you need, maybe talking about future needs as well. So it's good to factor in the steps that you might need in the future to bring, to bring those in. So is my data okay? Is this what I really want? This is what I notice here. This says file name. I see the merciful God.wma, synchrosystem.wma, a lot of them has got .wma. I don't want .wma. I want them separated. The actual names of the albums, maybe we should actually rename this. To rename this, I just double clicked on the column, and I'm just going to call these album names, because that makes more sense to me. And I just clicked on enter, and I want to remove .wma down. I don't want that. How can this be done? Under home, we can use the split column. So I'm going to split column, and under split column, we got, how do I want to split this column? Is it by the delimiter? Is it by number of character? In this case, I can't use number of characters because it's not even. The number of characters here is different from the number of characters on the third row. So you need to use what is applicable to your position. Do I want to split this by position, by lowercase? If that is what I've got in my data, lowercase to uppercase, it would have done it for me. By uppercase to lowercase, digits to non-digits, where you have both text and numbers together, that would have been easy to do. By non-digits to digits, if that's what you have. In this case, I think delimiter would work well for us. And it's picked it right. Dot is my delimiter. Something like a separator is what you call delimiter. If what I have is not dot, and it's something else, maybe space, I can come here and pick whatever it is that is separating the two parts of the column that I want to separate out. In this case, I see dot here, so I'll go with dot. And it's asking me, where do you want me to split this? Is it at the leftmost delimiter? Is it the dot that is at the leftmost part of the data, or the rightmost part of the data, or at each occurrence? I don't want it to split at each occurrence, just in case I've got dots within the actual names of the data. So I want you to split at the rightmost. So coming from the right, the first dot you see is where I want the separation to occur. Let's see if it gives us that. There's some advanced options here, which is not applicable now, that we can look at in our own time. Split using special characters, that's not applicable here as well. So I click OK, and we see it has separated that for us. So all the WMA, it's removed all the dots actually as well. And I don't have WMA down my data anymore. This is looking more readable to anyone that's going to use this data. The merciful God, synchro system, going down, Arambada, Woje, and all of that. Quite good news, quite for Bamimo, and so on and so forth. So if I still feel like I need this column, I would leave it if it's still going to be relevant. If not, I will remove it. Let's look at how the relevance of it. Is it possible that it's relevant over time? Okay, there's different types of albums that I split them into. Okay, so maybe I'll leave it and just rename that. Or maybe I've got that somewhere else. Look at file extension. It's actually in file extension. So instead of leaving this, I'll remove it. So I'm right-clicking and removing this, so that is out of the way. That is cleaner. And I can rename this. Okay. Before I rename that, every step that we have done has been recorded. And all of those recorded steps are what are being translated into this M language, the formula that is using in the formula bar. Normally the aim of somebody using Power BI, as we get better and better at it, is that we want to do all this in as few steps as possible. We don't want too many steps, but we'll master that with time. Okay, so remember that I was going to rename this. Let's do two things. I want to rename this now, and I want to call this okay, album name. So I'm just going to remove the .1 album name, and it's gone on to add an extra step here, and that extra step is table equals table dot rename columns, and it's made reference to the previous step, removed columns, and this is what is done. It's changed from the previous name, album names.1, and now we've got album names. What if I don't want to do that? I don't want an extra step, because for every new data we bring in, it's going to go through all these extra steps to arrive at the final report that we make. So I don't want this extra step. I remove it, but I still want to achieve the name change here. I can easily come to this formula bar and change the name to what I want. So I don't want it to be .2 or .1 or anything. I just want album names, and I would enter that. Okay, what have I done wrong? The column album names of the table wasn't found. Details album names. Okay, let's remove that and do that again. Filtered rows, table.filter. Then we removed something. What did we remove? Okay, I see. So I already removed these album names. Let's remove this because we don't need this. Yes. Okay. So I was working on a column that has been removed already. Now, that again, this is one of the beauties of Power BI. If it can't find something that you are trying to make reference to, it will fly up in error. But it allows you to walk yourself through the steps to look for the error and correct that error. So in my previous step, it's saying that it has removed album names. And now I want to change these album names is what I want to change. Something that has been removed is what I'm trying to change the name of. So it's not going to let me do that. And that's why it's telling me it couldn't find it. So that step that I was trying to avoid, I will have to, put it back. But I'll show you where that example is doable. Normally, if where we are at wasn't at a place where the column had already been taken out, it will let me manipulate and change that name within the formula such that we don't have to have an added step, onto this our applied step here. That was what I was trying to achieve. So right now I'm going to click on that, remove the .1, and we have that. Okay, now I'm going to use this step to explain what I was trying to achieve before. Now, let's say that, okay, I don't want album names. I want this name to be something else. Maybe CD names. Because what I want to do now is relevant to the column. It's not a deleted column. It should let me do it now. So I want to change this to CD names. Let's see. Okay, now it makes that doable without adding an extra, step to it, because I renamed the column twice. First, I changed it to album names. That was this step. But rather than double clicking and changing to CD names, which could have, added another step on for me, I changed it on here. So like I said, we don't have to necessarily know how to, write all this from the beginning, but it's good to know how to use it, to your own advantage. Where can I highlight and remove and change, stuffs on here? And for us to know what all these brackets, stand for. What does hash stand for? What does it mean? If we have a grounding knowledge of that, it helps. Before we finish at all, let's quickly see if we can try to merge queries and append queries, because those are very relevant. So because we've got only one table that we brought in, I'm going to duplicate this again. So we've got it as CD name, and we are still under home. We've not even touched other functions up here at all. And if we go right to the right part, we've done most of the things here. We've got merge queries and append queries. They are both under combine. What does it mean to merge queries or to append queries? Okay, I'll do append first because it's going to be quicker. We append queries. Queries is just like saying you are doing union in SQL for those who are from SQL background. So before you can append query, your both tables that you want to append, that is, you want to combine them together, it's good for them to be to be in the same structure. That is, the number of columns I have in CDs must be what I have in CD2, because I'm trying to join them from top to bottom. So such that I join CD, which was on the top, to CD2, which would now would be at the bottom, and I increase the rows of it. So when I append, I'm increasing the rows. I'm joining top to bottom in terms of their rows. But when I merge, I'm joining on the right. That is, I'm adding on columns. Very quickly, let's show what that looks like. So I've got CD1, CD2, and because I'm very sure I made this CD2 from CD1 anyway, so they are the same thing basically. So I can easily append them, So let's this first one has got, if we look down here, it says it's got 13 columns and 861 rows. Now, if we combine these two, we should have double that number. Double that number in terms of rows, but we are still going to have 13 columns. Okay, we'll still have 13 columns, but we have double 861 rows. Now let's go on to append. Append queries or append queries as new. Do I want this new result to be a separate table, or do I want to just join the two together? Those are your options. Okay, so let's join them as new. And it gives me this dialog box here. Concatenate rows, which means combine from two tables into a single table. So I've got two tables. I've got CD, which I highlighted, and that's why we've got it here. And I've got second table, which is this one. Okay. So I say, okay. And it's bringing it, because I appended it as new, it's bringing it as a new query, which I can call appended. I can just call that appended. And if we come down to look at the information we are getting from the column profile in here, it says 13 columns, which is what we should still have. We didn't add any column. We just joined the rows together and we merged the rows. It's now more than 999, rows that we've got, because we joined 863 to 863 here. That is how to append. We appended as new, and that's why it's appearing as a separate. If we had appended as the same, cancel that. If we had used the first, it would just match the two together without giving us any third, option, any third query here. Okay, so that's what it would have done. I'm going to, delete that. That was just to show us. So I'll delete that. How about I want to merge? So this second table, I'm going to do a few things to it. Okay, I only need to have CD name. I only need their names. I want to make this table owners table, or album owners table, or musicians table. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll click on this table, and because I don't have time to be clicking like how many 12 more columns that are there to remove them, there's a quick shortcut which tells me I can remove other columns. So I'm going to remove other columns. I've done that with this one now. And because I know, okay, actually it's not CD names I want to remove. It's the actual names, of the musicians. I want to remove this one, this path here, which should be names. Okay, so I'll remove other columns. Now I want to capture this like a customer table from Tesco. So this is maybe a music industry, and we just want the unique names. I don't want King Sunny Ade to be showing like 15 times. I want one record, just one record of King Sunny Ade, just one record of Commander Ebenezer Obey, and each one of them. So what I can do is I can remove duplicates. I want to remove duplicates. And I just right-clicked. Remove duplicates is somewhere hidden in one of these buttons, as well. But it's so very quick for me to achieve by just right-clicking. So, and if we go down, here we go, it says remove duplicates. And so rather than having 863 rows that we had before, we now have just 54 rows, and I don't want this slash. This is it backslash, we'll call them. I don't want them. Okay, so I can do remove them with a few steps. I can say replace values. I want all of this backslash replaced with nothing. So I'm not putting anything. Replace with nothing. So I'm not putting anything here. And I've got all of those out of the way. So none of them should have that, anymore. Just in case there's a trailing space, when you type something like after typing King Sunny Ade, the cursor put an extra space. The computer will see that extra space as a character, and that might affect my data. So I'm just going to come under transform and I'll trim, So trim just removes any unnecessary space that shouldn't be in your data. Trim and clean. I'll just do that. I'll trim and I'll clean, And because I want them to have their own IDs, I can give them their own IDs, maybe under add column now. So I want this to have number 1 as the ID, number 2 as the ID, their own unique numbers. So under add column, I didn't want to do that under, it's not even under transform. We'll talk about transform and add column in another class. The two of them have mostly the same things actually. Under transform, you can see extract, you can see split column. Under add column, there is extract as well. But the difference is that transform would transform your original column. It will change that column itself. Add column will keep your column and then add another column where it gives you the results that you want. That's the difference between those two buttons. But because I want an additional column now, I'm going to say, give me index column. I want an indexed column and I want it to start from 1. If you want yours to start from 0, you can. It depends on what you want. So now these are their unique, their unique numbers. So index, and because that says index, can I change index to ID rather than, double click and have an extra step? Let's see. So I want it to be ID, and that changed it for me, and there was no extra step. Okay, so that is how to, one of the very simple ways of manipulating your data set or your query rather. Okay, so I've got this, and this says paths here. I don't want it to be path. So in our next class, we'll change this to names. I want them to be musicians' names. Okay, we've got it here as path as well. There's something I really want to quickly show before we finish. So we remove the backslash rather on here. Let's do the same here so that we have those two columns being uniquely looking like they are the same. So I'm going to replace values, and I put that backslash, replace it with nothing. And I'm also going to trim, because if it finds any extra space with them, it won't recognize that they are the same thing, you know. So transform, under transform, I'm going to trim any space that shouldn't be there, you know. So we've ended up forming two tables, and we can rename this CD2 because it's not a CD table. We can say this is a musicians. Let's just call them musicians. So we got the CDs and we've got the musicians. There's a whole lot that's still here to do. Example, this file extension, I don't want the dots before the WMAs and whatever is there. I don't want dot WMA. So I can, because they all have dots anyway, and even if they don't all have dots, I can remove the dots. So I want to replace values, and I say I want to replace the dot, and I'm replacing it with nothing. So I okay that, and that looks better. This just says open. It doesn't look relevant to anything. I'm going to remove it. So I remove that. Attributes, it doesn't make any sense to what I would really want to achieve with this either. So I remove, and we keep, removing anything that's useless. Size, this size, I want it to reflect as sales, sales in terms of how much they have made, so I put that they are sales. Indent, it's not useful to me, so I take it out, as well. So very quickly, in the next 2-3 minutes, let's bring this data in. So let's close and apply. I'm going home and I'm clicking close and apply. So it's applying the changes that we have made, and it's bringing this in. And now we are back into, it's closed that Power Query editor because we said close and apply. And now on the right-hand side where we've got fields, we've got visualization fields there, we can see our two tables that it has brought in. We can see the columns that we brought in under each one of them. But very important is the data model. The data model is where we have relationships. The two of the data, normally it should detect the relationship that's between them straight away. So I've got ID, I've got path. Do I have path here? Yes. So if it's not detecting it by itself, I'm just going to drag path to path here, and it's giving me a warning. This relationship has cardinality many to many. Now it is supposed to be one to many. One to many is the best relationship. And we'll talk, there will be a class where we'll really deal with just model, data model, what all this many to many, one to one, what they all mean, But right now I should ask, do we have any questions? It's a lot to, let me stop sharing. It's a lot to try and cover in one lesson. Transforming data, there's a whole lot that needs to be covered and it's when we transform the data really well that we then get to have the best result. So this is like building a foundation, a good foundation for the beautiful work, that you are going to do at the end. Let's see. So I'm going to stop sharing, and then any question, people? I hope today the class has been, I know I've just been talking, but that's how this class is, to be honest. But is there any question? Is there anything I said that's not clear that I may need to refresh on for when next we meet at all? I'm trying to stop recording. Anyone?